Hey everyone, welcome back to Under the Veil podcast. I'm your host, HELENA. I am a wedding photographer based in San Francisco, now turned business coach. And I have the pleasure of bringing on Taylor to talk about all things SEO and blogging. Welcome, Taylor.
Thank you so much for having me. I just love talking about SEO and blogging, especially for photographers. So I'm super excited to chat.
Amazing, amazing. We definitely need a chat because I personally feel like blogging and SEO has been a space where I've definitely neglected in my business. And so I think today's conversation is going to be so helpful for any of the wedding photographers or honestly any wedding pro that is listening in today. So super excited to have you. If you could tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you got into this field, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually started my business journey as a photographer myself. I started my business in college, and I remember I was doing, I think my first advertisement was for like $50 senior sessions at my college. And I got a couple of my first clients from that and eventually realized that I loved photography because I loved running a business. So I ended up from there going into wedding photography myself. And this
Wow.
was over in Eastern Washington. So I remember I did some second shooting and then started doing my own weddings and found myself in a place where I was serving more of a high-end luxury market. It sounds like it's similar to some of your students here and your listeners. So I did wedding photography for a while and really loved it, but the pull and the lifestyle of having to work on weekends and all of that was hard as I was going to grad school for marriage and family therapy. So I didn't have a whole lot of time and needed to just kind of fit things together where I could.
Totally.
So I made the transition into motherhood photography right after I graduated and pretty much went like full time into photography. And one of the biggest, I guess, growth factors was learning SEO. I remember I basically had a useless website. It was like really pretty. I had hired a designer and she did an amazing job, but it just was not reaching anyone. Like I was getting most of my bookings from Instagram, maybe word of mouth, but not really seeing any traffic from Google. So I hired my first SEO coach and she taught me the ins and outs of on-page SEO. I optimized my website and it just exploded my business. I tripled my income that year. I was serving a whole new audience of luxury motherhood full service packages. That's why I'm so passionate about SEO because it really did change my business. So fast forward to I did some photography business education and I became a photography education, a coach myself, and then realized that not everybody wants to do it themselves. And so that's why I started offering done for you SEO services where I essentially get to go into people's sites and just kind of knock out all the SEO tasks for them.
I love that. Oh my gosh. Okay. First off, girl of all trades. First off, going for school to be like a family and a marriage therapist. And then you were a wedding photographer for the luxury market for weddings specifically. And then you moved into motherhood and then you were a business coach. That's so awesome. That's incredible. Okay. I have so many questions after you said all that, which is amazing. Okay. So tell me a little bit about SEO for the luxury market because I think I've heard this kind of around just from other people, but they always kind of mention talk to planners, post on Instagram. You want to network with planners because that's really where the wedding luxury market is. But you're telling me, because you said it tripled your business. Maybe that was more for the motherhood, but tell me how it works for weddings.
Yeah.
Does it make sense for us to be ranking high for
Yeah.
Google and SEO and all that good stuff?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. This question excites me. Yes, I saw the biggest growth on the motherhood side because that's, what I optimized my site for. And in the motherhood photography space, there's no other vendors to really network with, chiropractors and different
That's fair.
practitioners that serve a similar audience. But I also optimized a wedding landing page on my website, which was kind of like a fun tester because I I still loved doing weddings and didn't necessarily want to fully limit myself, but didn't also want it to be on my main navigation because I wanted to look like an expert in motherhood photography. So I kind of hid that page, but it was still ranking really high on Google. And I would constantly get really good leads from Google from that one landing page. To answer your question about whether SEO is worth it for wedding photographers or wedding vendors in the luxury market, absolutely. Because even though there are a lot of people searching on Google that are looking for affordable services or they just don't know where to start, there are still those deal clients that are looking on Google to find you. A good SEO strategy targets both specific terms related to wedding venues, which is actually the blog is a perfect place to target specific luxury wedding venues that you want to shoot more at, different areas that might be where your ideal client lives. And that's a perfect opportunity to reach those members of that audience. When you target those more broad terms in your city, for example, where you're at, Helena, San Francisco wedding photographer, albeit that is a very competitive keyword, but when you target that type of keyword, you kind of cast a wide net, and then your website, if it's really dialed in, can do the conversion. It can do the attracting and repelling from there.
Okay, okay, I love that. Let's get specific. I'm gonna go really into the
Okay.
nitty-gritty. So tell us, like, what does a perfectly SEO optimized website look like for a wedding photographer? Like, what has to be there?
Yeah, I would say we'll start broad and then we'll go more specific. But I would highly recommend every wedding photographer fully optimize their main pages. So their homepage, about page, service pages, if they have an investment page. I would say portfolio pages are hard to rank on Google unless you set it up a certain way. And so that you could go either way, but making sure that every main page is optimized, which essentially means having the right language and the right components on the page to help search engines understand what that page is about, what your page is about in words
Okay.
that your ideal client is searching. So those are called keywords. And then on top of optimizing those main commercial service pages, adding in a blogging strategy can be so powerful because, like I said, you can target specific venues, you can target keywords like best wedding venues in San Francisco, Bay Area, different terms that meets your ideal client in a different part of the buyer journey.
Okay. Okay. So I love that. That's starting broad. Let's go
Yeah.
specific. And so when you're saying SEO optimized really means whatever the person is searching, we want to make
Mhm.
sure that each page is findable depending on the keywords that this person searches, correct?
Yeah.
So did I get that right?
Yep. Yeah,
Okay,
you wanna show
perfect.
up for those terms that they're searching for.
Awesome.
Exactly.
And then how do you know what people are searching?
Great question. It all starts with keyword research. And I actually
Okay.
feel like that's one of the top mistakes that photographers make when it comes to optimizing their sites. They don't do thorough keyword research. And so they're guessing, I think my ideal client is looking this term up. So I'm going to optimize my whole website for it. But without looking at the data, I mean, it's like you're just kind of throwing darts in the dark. You're
Totally.
not really seeing the data. So my tool of choice is actually called SEMrush, and it's where I do all of my keyword research for all of my clients and myself. And keyword research entails kind of looking up what terms you think your ideal client is searching. So for example, like in my area in Oregon, it would maybe be like Portland wedding photographer. And
Mhm.
so I would plug that into the keyword research tool. And there's all sorts of keyword research tools, but they usually give a couple different numbers. One is average search volume per month. So the number of searches that term gets every single month on average. And then it also gives you, usually it's called keyword difficulty or competition level. And that will give you a sense of how hard is it going to be for me to rank for this term. And the
Mm,
reason why it's such a big mistake to skip keyword research is because you could either be using a keyword that nobody's searching. And so you spent all that effort optimizing your website only to show up spot one on page one for a term that nobody's searching. Or maybe there's other keywords that are less competitive. So in your area, or even in Portland, these larger cities tend to be pretty competitive when it comes to terms like Portland wedding photographer or San Francisco wedding photographer. And so sometimes you can find other terms, like maybe if you add a Y at the end to make photography, or Portland area wedding photographer, or maybe even like the suburbs or other towns nearby that you could target that might have way less difficulty or way less competition. And ideally, the goal is that you get your page to page one because that's where you get all the clicks and that's where you get all the traffic. It would be hard if you were, stuck on page five because you targeted a super competitive term when maybe there was a less competitive term that you could have used. So that's what I always
Whoa.
start with. Keyword
That is
research.
gold. I feel like that was just gold right there. And you said something that really stuck out to me because you were saying how you want to look up keywords that actually get searches. And so, what
Mhm.
is actually a good number to aim for? Like, what if it only gets 10 searches a month? Is that something worth blogging about or
Mhm.
focusing on, or not at all?
I would say so for this is just based off of the work that I do for clients, but for main pages like home pages, service pages, commercial pages like that, I do tend to go for keywords that are a little bit higher than that, maybe around like 100 plus.
Okay.
It really depends on your area too. Like if you're in a smaller town, maybe there's less searches. And so it's all kind of relative to the other keywords that are available. But if you're in a bigger city, definitely I would go for the higher search volume ones if the competition, you kind of have to compare the competition levels too. But for search volume of 10 a month, I mean, that is a perfect keyword for a blog, in my opinion, because every single page that I optimize, I usually choose a handful of keywords. So I choose a primary keyword and then I choose about like 5 to 7 secondary keywords. And those are just really variations of the primary keyword, just so you can kind of use similar language, but slightly different. So it doesn't look keyword stuffy to Google. And then also, every single secondary keyword also gets searched too.
Mm.
So you can it kind of compounds on itself. So for a blog, I mean, if you're thinking long term, 10 people a month are 10 new people a month that are coming to your site. And after a year, that's 120 people that have found your blog. So I still think it's worth targeting. I tend to use those lower search volume ones on a blog as opposed to a main page.
Okay, okay, wait. So good. Okay, I have more questions. They're just rapid firing as you're talking about all this. Okay. And so when you find a good keyword, is it worth it to use that across multiple blogs or multiple sites, or do you
Mhm.
kind of want to, like, I essentially I'm worried about
Mhm.
overusing the keyword. And
Yeah.
is that a red flag to Google? Like, should I mix it up with those secondary and, secondary keywords? Or should I just like really focus on that like awesome keyword that's getting a lot of visibility?
I'm so glad you asked this question. This is another mistake that I see a lot. People taking their main primary keyword, for example, Portland wedding photographer, and then you see it show up on every single page of their website and then multiple blogs. That is actually a red flag, a big no-no to Google. It's called keyword cannibalism. And essentially what you're doing is you're making all of your pages kind of compete against each other for the same keyword. So ideally, no. You want to target completely unique different keywords on each page of your website. So it can be a little bit tricky if you offer one service. So you kind of have to be creative with like maybe on your homepage it's Portland wedding photographer, maybe on your wedding service page it's something different like wedding photography in the Portland area or something like that, or wedding
Mm.
photography packages Portland, depending on search volume. And then in your blogs, making sure not to cannibalize with your homepage keywords. So don't use Portland wedding photographer again in your blogs. Try to go for like Portland wedding venues, how to plan a wedding in Portland, getting married in Portland, how to legally get married in Oregon, things like that.
So good. Okay, yes. I feel like I've definitely made this mistake in the past before. But
You are not
I've
the
been
only one.
told I have been told that apparently my page ranks pretty high. And
Yeah.
my strategy to doing that was that I made sure I renamed my files
Mhm.
and what else did I do? I think like the metadata that I put into the website, like
Yep.
I made it keyword optimized, but I feel like I kind of just did things that were repetitive. I would
Yeah.
love to hear from you as an expert. What should we be thinking about as we're doing
Mhm.
file names for images, alt text?
That's a really great question, and I'm even thinking, like, if I were to optimize a page, like, all the different, checklist items that I would have, and you named a couple of them. Your file names for your images can include different key terms. I would say I try not to name all of the images on a page the same keyword, but
Yeah.
that's where the secondary keywords are really helpful because then you can use your primary keyword, you can use your secondary keywords, you can describe the image, you can talk about the wedding venue, you can talk about wedding in San Francisco or wedding ceremony on a lawn in San Francisco. You can be descriptive with it. The way that I think about it is when a Google bot or even like ChatGPT or just bots in general come to your website, I know at least with Google, the first thing that it looks at is your URL. So, what does your URL say? Which I don't think you need to necessarily make your URL your keyword. I don't think it makes that big a difference, but it does assess your URL. And then from there, it looks at your metadata. So your page title and your meta description. And so it's very important that you have some variation of your primary keyword in there. And then from there, it looks at your headers. And so it looks at your H1, which ideally there would be only one header one on each page. So that's like your main header. And the reason is because when a bot comes to your website, it wants to know the most important information. Like, what is this page about really quickly? And humans do too. So if you have your primary keyword in your H1, it then kind of tells Google that's the main topic of the page. So keyword in your H1, and then from there you have these secondary headers like your H2 and your H3 and your H4 can all, be descriptive and include secondary keywords and things like that. Essentially just the main thing is helping the bot and humans, but helping the bot to really understand like what your page is about. And you can't necessarily do that if you don't want to put the words wedding photographer on your page. I do get sometimes like different, people pushing back, like they want to use more artistic language, which I totally understand. You want it to be on brand, but you have to help the bot figure out what your page is about. So you've got to use the term somewhere, even if it's in like a little eyebrow header, which is also why I love Show It because you can kind of play around with that a bit more.
Yes, actually, that was a great mention because I use Show It and I've been on it for 5 years now, a very long time. And I feel
Yeah.
like I was told in the past that Show It's really great for SEO, which is why I hopped on it. And so
Mhm.
for any photographers that need to migrate over, like what can
Mm.
they expect in terms of results for SEO? Because now they're moving to
Yeah.
an entirely new platform. Does that affect their ranking on Google?
Yeah, it usually does. Anytime you do a redesign or you switch platforms, unless you design it exactly the same with the exact same headers and the exact same copy and same settings. I mean, you could do that and kind of minimize the volatility, but most people when they do switch platforms, that is a big question that I get asked a lot. You can expect volatility. It's hard to say like how long it'll be volatile depending on like what you changed.
Yeah.
Re-optimize the new website is really important, and especially if you're migrating from a platform like WordPress or Squarespace or even Wix. Those platforms, except for Wix, I would say Squarespace, WordPress,
Talk about Pixie Set. Because a
Pixie
lot of people
Set too, they all kind of the issue that I have with them, the reason why it's not my absolute favorite is because from an SEO and design standpoint for photographers, it's really difficult when the styles, the header styles, like the font styles and everything are connected to the header HTML tag. It's really hard to explain, but in Squarespace, when you use the header one style, that has to be the header one. So you can't use that style again later in the page because then you'll have two H1s. So
oh, I
that makes
see.
it really difficult. That said, when you move into Show It, people aren't used to having to like individually set every single piece of text up. So that is, oftentimes lost when they switch over. But I will say though, even though Show It is my favorite platform to work on because you just have so much freedom, the other platforms are not necessarily worse for SEO or better for SEO.
Oh,
What matters the most is like how you optimize your page. It's just, you have to take some extra steps to like set things up and Show It, but you have a lot more flexibility and freedom.
yeah, I could see that, especially when you were saying like you can only have one H1.
Yeah.
Now you can't do it twice, otherwise like, you can't use that same font because now you'll have
Mhm.
that twice, but you really should only have it once when you're saying
Yes.
we're optimizing your page, right?
Exactly. It's all about sending signals to Google. If you have a couple H1s on your page, it's not the end of the world, but for best practices, it is good to have just one main header and then you kind of have a good hierarchy after that. It does make it a lot harder on platforms like Squarespace and WordPress. It depends on what I mean, WordPress is just you never know what you're going to get when you open a WordPress website because they're custom to.
Okay, love it. That was so much good information about our websites. I would love to kind of talk about other platforms. I don't know if that's
Yeah.
something that you touch on in terms of SEO for Pinterest or even
Mm.
AI, which is a whole nother topic.
Yes. I love talking about, things that are coming and already are in terms of, like, search engines like ChatGPT and Perplexity and other AI models. I have dabbled in Pinterest SEO, and it's much more basic, I would say, than Google.
Mm,
SEO, I mean, there are keyword research tools that you can use and, plugging the right keywords in title, your pin description, renaming your files. A lot of the same concepts kind of apply to
okay.
Pinterest. Yeah, I don't go too far into that. But in terms of the AI search engines, what I have noticed, it's fascinating. I have noticed that the photographers that focus on their blogs are the ones that are showing up in ChatGPT search results and getting bookings. And
Whoa.
I think it's
Okay.
because in your blog, you're able to answer questions or address prompts that people are typing into like ChatGPT a bit more in depth than on like a service page or a homepage alone.
Fair.
So when people, the way that people search in ChatGPT is just slightly different than like typing in. So for example, in Google, we might type in like Oregon elopement photographer, but in ChatGPT, we're typing in like, can you find me an Oregon elopement photographer that shoots film and maybe offers Super 8, whatever that might be. And so they're adding more to the prompt.
More
And yeah,
specificity.
exactly. It's a lot more specific, and you're adding these qualifiers and adjectives, and it just is a little bit easier to get more in depth in a blog than,
Mm.
if you were to just optimize your main pages. Or if they're planning a wedding at a specific venue, then you have the opportunity to show up. So the blog is just so powerful for that. And I also think it is really a big game changer in terms of how these search engines view your website as an authority and expert versus someone that just put a bunch of keywords on a site.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. That's so good. I love what you said there in terms of being more specific and like how we can get into the nitty-gritty. If I were to give advice to a wedding photographer after what I just heard from you, what are some of the things that they are searching in chat?
Mhm.
What are some of the problems that they're trying to solve, right? Like they're probably looking at like what's an average price for a wedding photographer
Yeah.
based in San Francisco or Los Angeles or New York. And
Mhm.
if they're going to venues, maybe they're like, what's the best time of year to get married at this certain venue?
Yeah,
And things like that. Or like, which wedding planner is best to work with in this
yeah.
area? So that's how you can kind of show your expertise. And I also talk about that on Instagram, how it's important to
Mhm.
show your expertise, share knowledge, share education so people can learn to trust you. And you can just repurpose your content too, right? From
So true.
Instagram to your blogs, but now it's just long form content.
Yeah.
And now we have AI, which
Mm.
maybe is a good and bad thing, right?
Right, exactly.
Definitely a shortcut, but also maybe everyone starts to sound the same. So then how do
Mhm,
you stand out in that regard? I don't know if that's necessary, honestly, if you have to stand out in that
mhm,
regard in your own voice for blogs. I would love to hear your perspective on that specific like when you're creating a blog, how important is it to have your own voice or do we need to optimize these pages
mhm,
similarly to how we did on our website, right? Like you were saying, instead of
mhm.
using the artsy words, we're using the
Yeah.
standard keywords that Google recognizes.
Yeah, I would say, like, from an SEO standpoint, it's so important to still use those keywords, key terms throughout the blog post and address certain topics that are related to the main topic and things like that. And that's really important for SEO. You don't necessarily need to, like, have a unique voice when it comes to SEO. However, once people do get onto the blog post, it's easier to just say the right things and get them to view your blog post because you're ranking, but it's another to then convert them into a lead or convince them to like go to your other pages. So in that sense, I do think that humanizing the content and really bringing in your unique brand voice and your personality is truly what's going to convince them you should
Fair.
reach out to me.
Absolutely, that's fair. And how many blogs would you recommend a wedding photographer
Mhm.
who's trying to track those higher budget clients? How many
Yeah.
blogs do they need to post out a month for it to be, I don't know, optimized or
Mhm.
searchable?
Yeah, yeah. I would say there's really no hard number for everybody. I mean, it really just depends on what's going to be most sustainable because Google does like fresh content. And so it's not like you have to blog every single week for the rest of your life, but Google does, it doesn't love to show websites that haven't been touched in like a year, for example. And so
Yeah.
what you want to avoid, which I am guilty of in the past, is and even now, is like churning out like a bunch of blog posts because you're so motivated. And so I'm going to do like 2 a week and then all of a sudden it's just too much and then you just stop. I definitely think like there's no magic number. However, every single blog post that you write that's actually optimized, high quality, written very well, and with beautiful images has the opportunity to rank for unique keywords, reach more people, and turn those visitors into leads. And so if you're able to get out 1 to 4 a month, then that's amazing. That's better than none. Every single post has a lot of potential to meet a lot of people. So, majority of my clients, well, when they're working with me, we're doing 1 to 4, but I have had a lot of students. I have a blogging course, and I think what's sustainable is typically 1 to 4. But if you can get out more and they're actually really high quality, then by all means,
Yeah.
totally can.
The best thing about Google and SEO is that even though I haven't blogged in a really long time,
Mhm.
I am still ranking and people are still finding me. So if you can just get
Um,
something out there, you're going to see a return on investment as long as it's optimized, right? And it's done
yeah,
well. But
yeah.
like I got a 10K inquiry from someone on Google cuz I'm not posting actively
Yeah,
anymore about my wedding photography services. I still shoot weddings, but I'm not actively advertising for it, but I'm still getting inquiries, and
that's
that's
amazing.
that is, like that's key, and that's why we can't just be on one platform. If you're just on
Agreed.
Instagram, and if Instagram were to go away tomorrow,
Mhm,
you would have no business, right? And so we have to make sure that we're optimizing and that we're being seen on several platforms. And then
mhm.
how I like to approach this with my students is just how can you work smarter, not harder, right? What are some things
Yes.
that you've already spoke about where you stand on or like that you give an education on, and how can
Mhm.
you repurpose that content across multiple platforms, not even
Yeah.
just Google, from Instagram to Google, but also now on Pinterest
Mhm.
or on TikTok, right? There's just so many different ways in which people can find us. So
Yeah,
that
I'm a
was
huge fan of diversifying. I mean, I actually don't think that SEO is the best fit for everyone in this time. Some people are at a stage of business where they need leads like now, and so they can't invest into SEO because SEO is a long-term strategy. It's not like you can optimize your website and then see a lead the next day.
yeah.
Maybe, I mean, maybe sometimes you can, but most of the time that is not the case. So I'm a huge fan of like diversifying marketing strategies. But for some people, they are invested in that long term, powerful strategy and getting leads years later from a blog. I get leads all, I've closed my photography business and I still have my domain up and I'm still ranking. So I still get leads from my blogs and my main pages too. So it really is such a powerful sustainable strategy. It does require work up front, but at a certain point, you do earn that authority from Google too. So you don't have to blog consistently like every week forever. I said
Yeah.
before, maybe it's just you update some images every month or every 2 months. So at a certain point, it truly does pay off.
Amazing. Amazing. So good, Taylor. Thank you so much for all the information. We're
Yeah.
just coming to an end here, but I want to ask you just one last question for our listeners. If a wedding photographer should start today and they want to see real SEO results within the
Mhm.
next 90 days, what should they do and where should they start?
Ooh, what a big question. I think the best place to start is by learning on-page SEO. And so that includes the keyword research and putting the keywords in the right places, optimizing your images and things like that. Simply just learning that process, which even though it sounds really daunting and technical, once you get it once, I mean, that same process also applies to all of your service pages and any future blogs that you write. If there was one thing in that process that I would recommend starting with, it's keyword research, which
Yeah.
can be really motivating once you see how many people are looking up certain things and the competition levels. You get really excited about potential keywords. So if there's anything, I would say start there.
Love it. They'll start with the keyword research, and then now you know
Yes.
how to optimize your page. Otherwise, we're kind of blindly doing it, and then all that effort was for nothing.
Yes, true.
So, so amazing. Thank you so much, Taylor. And for my listeners who want to work with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, they can find me at alignedseo.com or on Instagram at alignedseo.co.
Amazing, amazing. So go follow her, check out her stuff. It's really amazing. I mean, she was a photographer herself. So if there's anyone else that's qualified to do it, it is Taylor. Thank you, Taylor, for everything that you chatted with us today. It was so helpful. We're super excited. I know you're going to get some awesome people to work with, and we've gained so much knowledge from you. So thank you again. For all those that have been listening, if you found this podcast helpful, follow Under the Veil Podcast on Instagram and on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And we'll see you next time.